Thank you, Alak, for that. Uh, I guess, non-introduction, which was very gracious, and for Rukmini for reminiscing about the 25 years. I have a slightly different memory, which is that our first conversation was one where I think you were maybe you were just bent on testing me. So you were, I think, specifically grumpy. And and now that I know how jovial you are, I know how grumpy you were then. And it was just a trial by fire. So that it was to see if these strange people, if they have the patience to be to work with an organization where I Prof. So I remember that day very well on top of a mithai shop in Mumbai. What I want to talk about, in a sense, is it carries on from that, which is that this is work that carries on work that we've been doing for a very long time under Rukmini's leadership in India and elsewhere, but mostly in India. And it's work about something quite specific, very specific in a sense. Maybe you'll think it's too specific, but has the advantage of then being, allow us to bore down very, this doesn't work. Somebody may. God. Where do I point? Kam nahi kar raha hai.
The computer se काम कर रहे हैं.
So it's something that, as I was saying, under Rukmini and Mother Chavan's leadership, we've been trying to do for many years, trying to understand why is it that kids don't learn. And I think and so this work is quite specific. It's really about trying to understand what is the missing piece in when we say children can't learn, don't learn. There are many possible hypotheses there, and the question is, can we pin it down to something specific? And not all of it, obviously, but I think it's still useful to understand just how small the gap is in terms of where the possibilities are and where we are. And is it a huge problem? Is it a small problem? Is it what kind of problem? So that's the motivation. We know from Pratham's work, from Asar, that children are, math is one of the places where children really are often behind. Half of the children in class 5 are at class 2 level or below. That's a number that would frighten us, should frighten us. It's not a number that's unique to India. It's really a global problem. This is not because kids are not in school. We know they are in school. They go to school every day, or not every day, but often enough. And if they don't go to school, that itself is a matter. When they enrolled in school, then that's itself a matter of concern. So why aren't they going to school? And part of the answer might be that school is extraordinarily frustrating place to be. And so we have to, we shouldn't take the fact that they don't go to school as just an explanation. It's an explanation that demands an explanation. On the other side, and there are many numbers like this, I can go on it, on what they can't do. On the other hand, they also true that only half the children between 14 and 18 could calculate to answer a practical question. So think about, maybe it's the abstraction of the math that's the problem. So let's ask them practical questions. A practical question could be, how many purifying tablets would be needed to purify a large pot if I tell you how many it takes to purify a small pot? And you don't see people being able to, people who could do one of them, who could do the division, couldn't do that. So there is some sense in which it's not just a problem. So it's both a problem of sort of test taking, if you like, of delivering on abstraction, but also one of practical, of trying to achieve something practical with the mathematics. Now, what makes that puzzling is, if you're going to, and this is less and less true now, thankfully, in a sense, if you go to a market in India, you might have noticed that there are kids who are selling on their own. And, if they were constantly getting the change wrong, it wouldn't happen. There would be too much trouble. People would get very upset. So one thing that's troubling about the fact that these children are being able to, carry on sort of selling, is that these people, why isn't it true of other people? Now, you might say that, well, they're special there, but, these are typically the poorest children, the children from the least privileged backgrounds. They're often school dropouts. So it's not the children who you would think would be particularly advantaged from the point of view of doing mathematics. So it's somehow, why are these children able to do it? And so in other words, it seems like being able to, take the exercise, and I'll talk a lot about this, so I'll tell you the basic kind of exercise, 400 grams of beans and 300 grams of carrots, I give you 200 rupees, you give me the change back. That's an exercise that children are doing non-stop, and for different prices, different commodities, etc. So how is it that they do this routinely, and yet somehow we find on the whole that the average Indian child is not doing very well? It's also this, and I would say that since there is a strong and maybe ideologically inflected point of view, it says that no, it's really malnutrition or children not having adequate, early childhood support. There's a large point of view which says that somehow in India we're failing children before the age of 3. There's actually nice evidence from Delhi, working with Pratham, Esther Juflo and others have worked with Pratham on these children who are at age 3 in these preschools, and in these preschools they can measure these children's performance in what are called non-formal mathematics. So mathematics using images, mathematics using association of pictures, where you don't need to be able to read numbers to be able to do it. And when you do that, what they were surprised by is that the performance of the average child in low-income Delhi neighborhoods, where they were doing this across a large number of low-income Delhi neighborhoods, where they were doing these studies, was comparable to the children in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Harvard and MIT are, and most of the children are children of graduate students and very privileged people. So so it is just not true that the Indian child is, by age 3 is unable to learn mathematics. It's the opposite of that. And I come back to this particular framing of the conundrum at the end, but keep that in mind, that it's not because they are they're unable to do mathematics at age 3. They're doing fine. So it's not lack of talent. So what is it? So what's going on? So that's the diagnostic problem. The diagnostic problem is not just a problem of saying, well, we're not providing the right level of resources or something. It's asking a narrower question. So maybe resources will somehow solve the problem. But the question is resources spent on what? And we're asking the narrow question, where does the process of learning get stuck? So that's the question. Very narrow question, but critical from the point of view of doing something about it. So we'll tell you 3 studies happened in sequence. First was in Kolkata. These were exactly, I sort of started telling you about it. These were 201 children working in 92 markets in Kolkata. And first thing that happened was that there were mystery shoppers. People who just went and their job was to just go to these kids and buy vegetables or fruits. So there was nothing surprising about that. The children didn't think there was anything strange about it. People showed up, asked for buy vegetables. They were trained to know what the answer was, so they could easily judge whether the answer was correct. And they were told to say, if the answer was not correct, to say, no, that's not correct. I don't think that's correct. And then the child was given a chance to readjust the amount. So that was first thing. Once that was done, the enumerator went back and told typically the child had a guardian somewhere, asked the child's guardian, can we get the child to participate in a written assessment test very closely related to the ASAR, in an oral assessment test, and some other things I'll tell you about. But it's mostly, so these were kids in the Kolkata studies. We had very young kids relatively. These were 12-year-olds, should not certainly have been working. Most of them were in school, so they were really working in the morning before they went to school, but some were not. So the first fact is that kids they get it right 90% of the time, first shot. Okay? First shot, they give you the right change back. And then when you push back, that number goes to 95, 97, 98%. You say, no, that's not right. They immediately correct. So it's really, they're very good at it. Okay. Second question, once you ask them about so then what we did was we asked them about, instead of these actual prices that they're used to doing, we asked them about hypothetical transactions, and then they do much worse, but still they're able to do it 40% of the time. The last one is not so interesting, so I'm not going to spend it. Now, take these kids who can do this. If you think of what it requires doing a division, a multiplication. So when you ask 400 grams of beans plus 600 grams of peas, that requires doing division first to get what 100 grams would be, then multiplication, then addition, then subtraction. And they were either given 100 rupees or 200 rupees. So it requires a series of mathematical operations. They can do them mentally. 98% can do, one-digit mathematics, but division. When you give them the typical ASAR test, they only 30% can do the division. And even the two-digit, even the subtractions, which is a two-digit subtraction, only about half of them can do. So why can't they do this market subtraction but not this one? Sort of the question you should hold in your head right now. The thing that's striking is that when you we're change the framing of the question from, a few purely abstract 63 minus 37 to saying you have 63 apples and you sold 37. It changes. The outcome changes. The left bar is 63 minus 37. The right bar is in each case, the left bar is, the columns are with subtraction and division. The right columns are division. The left columns are subtraction. The written or sort of abstractly framed question, these are now asked orally. Only 43% can do. When you frame it as a anchored question, 90% can do. And that's a similar pattern you see in everything. It's just the changing the words of it. And this is, I'll insist a bit more on this because we're going to do this very carefully. When I say, right now they're slightly different problems, so you could say maybe they're different. We're going to do the identical problem eventually. So exactly the same problem, just with different words. And that makes a huge difference. So you could wonder, maybe, so, and to be honest, once I tell you that, you shouldn't really wonder that, but because here we're asking them, these are unincentivized things, but maybe they're incentivized to think when they think of beans, they start thinking market, I'm going to make money. So they think, so what we did, one thing we did was we used, actually, let me come to that. So you might think there's incentives. I'll come to incentives. The incentives are different. Now, I should say, almost our surveyors were instructed to only go to people who were or children who were selling alone. So there was no mama or baba who was around the corner to answer the question, and indeed. They never got a help from anybody. No child used a calculator. Zero. They didn't have a calculator. None of the children had a calculator. And what is interesting is often that when they heard of an anchored problem, they answered it as a problem that they do it in the head. When they hear when they see it as an abstract problem, they reach for pen and paper. So that's a. So at this point, you might say this is maybe it's because incentives are different, and maybe. Or second, maybe they are just not turning on the same skills. That seems likely, but specifically in what way? Why are they not being able to solve these problems? Do they have efficient strategies for solving these problems that they face in the market that they're not using somehow? How does it compare with other children who are in schools? Is it the case that the children in schools have the same set of issues? Are they also very good at when it's anchored and not otherwise, or is there something different? Okay, so those are questions that you might have thought about, and so the second study addresses those. So. This is in Delhi. These are 400 children in 39 markets, again, 3 rounds of market transactions. Then, first thing we did was we randomly assigned them to incentivized, non-incentivized transaction. So they were, sorry. not this transaction is always incentivized. You use the wrong word. Incentivized, non-incentivized, sort of. When we do the study, when you are asked to do math, you could be either told, "We'll give, if you get it right, you get 100 rupees," or if you or say nothing. Okay. So to make sure that it's not because they want to, they're used to when it's a market transaction, it switches on their brain and they think about money. And when it's not a market transaction, they don't think. So to give them, 100 rupees was not a small amount of money because the profits in vegetable selling are not that high. So it's still a fair amount of money, actually, from the point of view of a child. This was maybe now 9 years ago. So, and then there was an oral assessment, like I said. There were hypothetical transactions, again, and we varied in there, making the scenario more and more unfamiliar, going from something that's very similar to the transaction, what you sell in the market, to something more different. And then we had background information. Again, these are older than the Kolkata children. They're 14. They're in school. Again, 61% are in school. And again, the same fact, which is maybe less dramatic, but still, the 80% of first time they get it right, I don't know, 80 to 90% of the time, and then it goes up to 94, 95%. And with hypothetical transactions, again, they depending on how distant it was from what they were doing, as the distance increases, they less well, but it still do, with one correction, they do 60% of it get it right. That's so. In other words, they're pretty good they have the hypothetical transactions. As the transaction becomes more and more unlike the one that they do routinely, it gets worse. So there's some effect of practice. They do very badly in the assert tests. And as in Kolkata, the assert tests, this is I think 15% can do the division, so this is worse than in Kolkata. They're older and they do worse, so that's somewhat worrying. And on the other hand, and here the differences are less dramatic, but again, when it's anchored, the problem, they do better. When you ask the question, the same kind of question, when you ask them with, you are selling this, you have 67 tomatoes and you've sold 39, what remains? They do better than when they're asked the question, what is 67 minus 39? So same pattern, less sharp actually. The differences here are somewhat smaller, but still you can see that the difference is between, almost a difference of factor of 2. And one thing that we can see is that so if you look at this, what's in the very small print, which is so small that even I can't read it from here, so you can't read it, is the differences between the left column are problems where you can solve by rounding it. They're easy to round. So if it's 69 minus something, you can turn it into 70 minus something. Okay? Easy to round problems. If it's 66 minus something, it's harder to do the rounding. So we classified problems as being easy to round and more difficult to round. So, and you can see that they do much better at the rounding problem. Now that might be a universal thing, but you'll see that actually when we get to the school children, it's a different, you'll see a different set of results. So I want to highlight this because we're going to come to the school children in a minute. Okay. So this is, they are, when it's roundable, they do much better than is not roundable. These are abstract problems. When they're roundable, so when you can easily use them, use the, round it to the 0 or the 10, and then you do it, it's much quicker and more correct than when they can't. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind, is that it's really they have some strategies. The strategies are easy to use when the problem is roundable. When it's less roundable, then they have a harder time doing it. But these are all mental math strategies. They're doing, when you give them these problems, they try, mostly they use. So this next thing, so that's the basic. Now going back to what I already mentioned. First thing we're going to do is there's no effect, I should say that there's no effect of incentives. Okay, so this is first thing which I had suggested is maybe there's an incentive effect. The incentive effect is 0. There's absolutely no effect of it whatsoever. You don't see, you pay the 100 rupees or not, they don't get it more right. Now, the school children. School children are 200 children in 20 public schools around the markets. Again, of transactions, but simulated transactions. We gave them, it was a little bit ridiculous. We bought plastic fruits and vegetables and we asked them to, we are a market, we're coming to buy, you're a seller. Okay, so we exactly simulated a market. And then there was incentivized and non-incentivized, written, and the same kinds of things. And then hypothetical transactions, different kinds of hypothetical transactions. School children are substantially better. This is Delhi schools, and Delhi schools actually do pretty well in Assar. This is much better than the national average, right? So these kids are doing quite well. So, and I say this as a warning, in a sense, is that in a sense, so these are kids who are doing well in the Assar test. They are really quite, they on the basic skills, they seem to be quite up. The hypothetical market problems, they do much better as well. Okay, so they're really outperforming the working school children. As soon as you give them the transaction to do, they collapse. It's the opposite. The school market children are very good at market transactions and collapse as soon as you ask them abstract problems. The school children can't sell vegetables. Okay, so they have all these abstract mathematical skills, but they can't sell vegetables. And if you, they do pretty well, as I said already, and maybe for that reason they benefit less from these strategies with problems that can be simplified. The ones can be turned into rounded. They benefit less. It's hard to tell whether that's because they're already doing better or not. So they do well in the abstract problems, but you can see that it doesn't matter so much. Now, what's striking here is that they really, if you look at the operations they do many, many more operations. The school children on the right, the working children on the left, just the number of operations they do to get there, they write many things. A whole piece of paper will be scribbled over in solving everything. They solve it, but the reason why they do badly in the market is they feel pressured to answer. If you give them an abstract problem, they sit down and they scribble and they figure it out. So it's the speed that's the constraint. It's the number of things they need to do. So the number of things they have to do, number of times written on a paper, average is 120 for the school children and 6 for the market children. 6 market children have on average write 6 things on a piece of paper to solve the problem. School children, you write 120 things. Many of them irrelevant, but they write many things. So it's a very different culture. Basically, these are very different ways of approaching the problem. So that's to take stock. We're trying to understand what's going on, and I'm telling you that in some sense, it's you see a kind of strange symmetry. The market children are really good at market transactions. They have a certain facility with the numbers. They don't write on paper. They solve the problem. Even when it's abstract, when they try to write on paper, in fact, I can tell you something else which is not in the slides, is that when they try to write on paper, they have disastrous outcomes. They are really bad at writing. When they don't write on paper, they often get it right. The school children always solve the problem by writing, very elaborate algorithms, but then they can solve it. When the problem with the market problems is that they require a certain facility and speed, and the speed is a problem. So, now, I'm going to tell you a little bit more, so sort of address some of the other concerns. So, one thing we were worried about is that maybe we think these problems are the same, the market problems and the anchored problems and the non-anchored problems. But maybe the anchored problems are actually, and I didn't tell you the anchored, non-anchored difference for the market children, for the school children. So we're going to do them for the school children as well. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to be much more careful in using exactly the same numbers now, rather than what we thought was similar numbers. That requires, you have to worry about the fact that if I give you the same problem twice, so we have to then have a strategy for that. So that's the reason why I haven't done it, but we decided it's worth doing. And we're going to, for example, we're going to worry about whether, for example, we find that these market children, school children don't respond to incentives. Do the market children? The market children don't respond to incentives. Do the school children do? And for example, is it the testing itself? Is it stress? Is it something else? So can we look into that? And finally, is there going back to the sort of the resolution of this, coming to a resolution? Is it the case that these market children just don't see that they know a way to do it? If we tell them, look, you did that one, why can't you do this one? Offer them one hint of that kind, can they do much better? So remember, I'm saying that in a sense they can do these things, but they can't do those things. Why is that? Is it the case that they don't make that connection? And if so, what does that imply for the pedagogy? I'll end with some thoughts on the pedagogy. So these are market children and school children. Again, similar as this slide you've seen there. Mostly. Okay. So in the mystery shopper, the working children again do perfectly well. Now they are asked 2 hypothetical market questions. One is identical, same goods and same prices as the mystery shopper. So exactly the same problem. And same goods and new prices. They do, but it goes down substantially. 66% can do it. When you give them the same goods and same, it's a bit higher, but it goes down. And then if you take the two, it's 66% can do it. Same goods, new prices. So they do well, but not as well with the real transactions. And part of it, a lot of it is I said this before, but here's the number. 47, as soon as you say it's an abstract problem, they start using pen and paper. And when they use pen and paper, they do very badly. So it's almost like a switch. As soon as you see this is a school problem, I'm going to do it the school way. It's a market problem, I'm going to do it the market way. It's the label that switches their mathematical method. Okay? So it's really almost mechanically that. So when there's a mystery shopper, 0% use paper. As soon as you say it's an abstract problem, 47% use paper. And when they do that, they do bad. It's not causally, we can't tell, because it's not the case that, is where there's a causal effect of using pen and paper, or those who knew they don't know the answer use a paper, but they know the answer. They can do it in the market transaction. So it's probably not because they don't know the answer. It's because they use this method that they are failing. So again, they don't do well on abstract subtraction, and in roundable problems do better. Pen and paper they want to use. So second question that we wanted to ask is maybe just that these working children, the testing itself is scaring them. They are there because they don't like the test. So what we did was randomize whether or not they would get, whether the market problem will come before the abstract problem or after. That's one thing to see, because the market problem, they do well. So maybe doing well gives them confidence. And second thing, we separately had there is a whole body of work in social psychology on encouraging children. The work of Claude Steele at Stanford inspired this a whole body of work where it's showing that, when you encourage children or tell them that they're able to do something, they do better. So we introduced that intervention to see if they are able. And stress, we have some standard ways of measuring stress. And when you do this, these treatments, both the treatments reduce stress. So, but they don't improve mathematical performance. So you do see reductions in stress. When you reduce stress, stress goes down. You tell them that, yes, doing the market transaction first helps them. It makes them more confident, but they don't do the transaction, the actual calculation any better. Hints, that's the other thing I have suggested. When they fail, the interrogator tells them, think of it as a market transaction. And then they get it. Then you get very large improvements immediately. Another kind of hint we could give was rounding hints. Think about, in this problem, instead of trying to do it the way you're doing it, think of the fact that you can round it and do it. And again, that increases performance by 15 percentage points. So you go from 40 to 55%. Then the school children. This is, again, now you've sort of seen the script, so I'll skip that. Again, they are, they do pretty well. They do less well on anchored problems. So interestingly, remember, the school children do better at anchored problems. these children do worse at anchored problems. That's something we had hypothesized, but now we see evidence of it because we did the anchored problems for them and the non-anchored problems. So abstract problems, they do worse at anchored problems. Worse, not hugely worse, but remember the market children do hugely better at anchored problems. And written and oral abstract problems, they do very similarly, because they eventually use whether it's written down or not, they are always allowed the possibility of writing pen and paper, and they do. Round table problems, they don't make no difference to them. Then we go to the role-playing exercise. So trying to do real transactions, children play shopkeepers, we pretend money and goods, etc. You already heard this. No pen and paper, and they're given 4 minutes. The average time taken by a child in a market is in seconds. 4 minutes is a very long time. If you go to a market and somebody is calculating for 4 minutes, you would leave. You'll drop your bananas and say, I'll go somewhere else. 4 minutes is infinite time. They're given 4 minutes. 1% can do it in 4 minutes. That's what I was telling you, that they write on paper, they do this, do that, and they eventually can try to solve it. Give them a 4-minute limit, and only 1% can do it. 85% of this market children can do that in seconds, and the school children can't do it in 4 minutes. Incentives makes no difference. I'm going to turn to literature. So the hints, we remember I told that the market children benefit a lot from hints. This is how you round, this is how you think of it as being, you have 67 onions and you sold 39, makes no difference. Hints make no difference to this. Remember, they are, they're given the exact same problem, and for the abstract problem, the non-working children, oral anchored problems, the school children do get 0, basically. That's all. Now you should see the pattern. With an oral anchored problem, they get 0. For oral abstract problem, they do better than the school, because even with an anchored problem, they just feel like, okay, this is not the kind of problem I'm supposed to solve. Okay, so just to conclude, I've sort of now kind of beaten to death the point, but I think it's an interesting one. The lack of transferability here from market to math and to market to school and vice versa suggests that math is learned as a very narrow algorithm. Here is this is how it's written down, the problem. Then you switch on this algorithm, and everybody learns that. The school children learn that, the market children learn that. They think of it as being an algorithm that they're supposed to apply. The school children, the market children have you learned 2 different algorithms. The school children mostly have only learned 1 algorithm, and so they can't switch on the other algorithm. But both of them think of as being as distinct things to do. They're used to doing things in different ways. The school children can kind of switch on something that eventually allows it to solve the problem. It takes 10 minutes to do it. When they're given too little time, they can't do it. The market children are extremely fast at doing it, but they don't switch on that algorithm unless you tell them to do so. So, and this echoes the fact that, one of the things that I mentioned, this study of the preschool mathematics, one of the things they showed is that when you when you give these children more games to play, so they train themselves in preschool mathematics, get better, they improve even more. They already start very good and they become even better at non-symbolic mathematics. Then they asked, does this help them in learning school mathematics? And the answer is no. If you just send them, these children who are doing much better and, at global standards you send them to the next stage, the schools, do they use these skills that they've learned? No. The pedagogy doesn't use them. If you tell the teachers, can you use some of these skills? Then you start to see a little bit of it. So it's really about, the pedagogy is extremely close-minded. The way the pedagogies are structured, they are a set of, this is how you do things, and there is no connection given to, think of how you would do it in a more, if you were left to yourself. That's not a question that's asked. We did end by telling us a very different study. We did a study in Uganda of an intervention, which was the following. Teachers were taken to every weekend went to visit, a group of teachers went to visit a particular location where there was a facilitator, typically not a teacher or not even somebody with a college degree, who said, look, you spend your time discussing here's a set of issues you describe, and these were structured in the sense, and there were these kinds of issues of saying, I show you this figure, tell me what it is. And somebody says it's a cube. And then the facilitator says, why do you say it's a cube? And through this process, they get used to kind of thinking about the connection between the world and the abstract ideas that they are supposed to teach. They go back to school and they teach. When we look at them after 2 years, the pass rate at the school leaving exam goes from 50% to 75%. Remember, we're not training the children at all here. The children are getting no training. The teachers are not getting any training. The teachers are not actually, the person who's facilitating them is not competent to teach the teachers. He's much less educated than teachers. They're just getting practice in opening up this black box of knowledge. Which is, here is the answer. Rather than here is the answer, here is the discussion. So these teachers are much more likely to discuss in class. They are much more likely to engage with the children. The idea, I think, at the heart of what we're hitting is the attitude which I must say I faced in school. There was teachers were a weak sort of vessel full of knowledge, and they poured it inside you. And if you didn't keep your mouth open, they beat you. That was our school. I think that particular model it creates this kind of pattern, which is that you don't question why this algorithm is the right algorithm for you. You know something. You're not supposed to use that. The fact that you can do this question in 2 seconds in the market doesn't mean you're supposed to use that. You're supposed to use the algorithm your teacher gives you. You take a piece of paper. As soon as you see a problem written as 87 minus 39 rather than 87 tomatoes versus 39 minus 39 tomatoes, you pick up a piece of paper and you start scribbling. I saw a child, I was doing this study in Delhi, I saw a child trying to do a division. And his problem was he knew that you're supposed to draw a line and then write some numbers, but he didn't know which from left or right. And so but he knew that was the picture he was supposed to associate with it. So it is a sort of symbolic association with these practices very specific practices. This is how you're supposed to do it. This is how, in my school, if you ask, why can't I do it the other way, you got beaten. Usually, but that particular mindset, maybe they don't get beaten, but that particular mindset of the teacher having the answer and that you are just supposed to, imitate. I think that's at the heart of all these things we are seeing. That's at the heart of one of the. I think if we had to find one answer to the question, why are our kids not learning? It's because we're not teaching. We're pouring into them. I'll finish there. Thank you.
If you can just introduce yourself, ask your question briefly, then we can get a couple of questions that Abhijit can answer.
Since the socioeconomic background of the two groups of children you talked about, street children and school-going children, they seem to be comparable. Those are coming from public school. So, why did the study not take into consideration children from private school? Since scholars have said that this study cut it off
Okay. One here and one here. Yes. Please. Yeah. Sir, your name, please.
Is the curriculum of mathematics and other subjects not very troublesome or hard for the children? They cannot cope up with it and they are stressed. Their minds are being taxed and they don't find it interesting. Second thing is especially mathematics in 8th or 9th or 10th classes, which is not used in practical life or in any offices or in any work field. And second thing is that corporal punishment is given in the schools. Children are beaten badly on small mistakes. That is one reason of school dropouts. I studied that 40 or 50% students leave schools before they reach the 8th standard. This is a cause of illiteracy.
Sir, if you ask your question, then we can have it answered. Yeah.
How it can be solved, whether it is really existing or how it can be solved, what you people think and how it will be solved.
Okay. Yeah. We'll take one more. Back here, back there. Excuse, here. Yeah. Okay.
Hello. Sir, it was a very fascinating presentation. I want to ask you, especially in the context of Bihar, where recently BPSC examination was taken, but one subject, that's Urdu, was not considered. So, considering the psychographics of children wanting to have Urdu language, such kind of administrative lapse, what are the corrective actions, number one? And number two, children from various backgrounds, like especially in the context of Bihar, school children are there, street children are there. And then, we have now, virtually 23 years of Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. So, in this context, of course, madrasa children are also there. So to what extent madrasa or modernization program? So basically it's not a question to me, but then I wanted to basically your reflections on the kind of variables that are impacting the learning. Thank you.
So let's give Abhijit an opportunity. Very broad-ranging sets of questions. But I think a lot of it is on this broader background of curriculum, kinds of children who are in our different schools, and potentially from our last questioner, language in which you're being addressed.
So I have nothing to say about the language part. Not much is known, actually. A little bit of evidence that mother tongue is good, but not enough evidence. I think this is the conversation on whether this syllabus is being diluted too much or should be diluted more. The two of you had different points of view, and I would say that that's probably reflects the. Personally,
I'm not worried about the dilution of syllabus. I think we could. I think the amount of content that people have to learn is absurd. There's no reason to learn content. In fact, if you didn't know the capital of I don't know, Uzbekistan, nothing in the world would collapse. I feel you can look it up. My general instinct is very much that if we taught our children a few things very well, we would be in a better place. But I'm not an expert. I agree with the fact that we should move towards a more practical use of mathematics. I think that's the whole point, is that when it's anchored, the people who practically use mathematics benefit when it's anchored. Problem is that the people who don't use mathematics have no idea, or when you anchor it, they get scared. What's going on? I'm not supposed to be actually selling vegetables. I'm doing mathematics. And the fact that those are the same thing, it doesn't seem to occur to them.
I mean, one of the comments that came to my mind listening to your presentation was it's almost by putting children into the kind of school mathematics curriculum, we are preventing them from thinking about real life problems and how to apply them. And therefore forcing them to go back to pen and paper and do sometimes unnecessary, long, complicated paper stuff that doesn't really help either to solve the abstract problem or the practical problem. There's a gentleman here who's been put up his hand. Yeah, let's hear.
Yeah, Professor Banerjee, sir. I think the way you compared with the street smart and school smart children, I think street smart children can be successful in public and politics. We have a very good example of recent our politics also. So how you compare the street smart and school smart children in public life?
Okay. Next, in the middle.
Wants to ask.
Okay.
We can mix
Now we have one lady there, our first lady, so we should. Okay. 1 second. The mics have to reach them faster.
Thank you, Professor, for this thought-provoking presentation. I have one question from the eyes of public policy. Can digital tools help in such a scenario, especially for the more disadvantaged children who are more likely to attend schools with less impactful teachers? Not the best versus digital learning tools, but the lower quality schools versus digital learning tools. So is that like a workable solution for the times we live?
Okay. Third question from Tanuka.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about this language issue again, because we have found that a lot of these low-cost private schools, I think somebody was saying, they have English medium books and, everybody wants to study in English medium, but they have this mother tongue, they have no written material at home in English and they don't know that. So while teaching, we have found that, I'll just give you a small example how problems can crop up. In Hindi, if you say, 10 se 2 ghataye, so you give the 10 first and then you say 2 has to be subtracted. But when you say it in English, you say subtract 2 from 10. So for them, when we teach them, they find it very difficult to translate it in their head. So this is just a practical thing we found while teaching the children. So language, I do feel does have a, role to play in this, but your thoughts on this, please.
Abhijit, there's one question which is linked to one of our questions from the audience that came on Zoom. So let me give that to you. Mm-hmm. Can technology like AI, along with online learning, enable students to improve performance and adopt cognitive tools?
So, again, I really don't have I would like to maybe know more about mother tongue learning. I know that English is aspirational. It's very hard to get people to actually learn in the mother tongue. That's the problem. If you look at Karthik Muralidharan's study of vouchers, the thing that private schools do is exactly, so these are kids who are randomly assigned vouchers to go to private schools. What do they learn? They learn English. little bit of English, little bit of Hindi, actually. Interesting. It's in Hyderabad, so they don't. And what do they not learn? Mathematics and mother tongue. So overall, so people are, have an aspiration for learning English. I think we have a whole. We can insist as much as we want that people should learn in mother tongue, but we've also created such a hierarchy within our society of the English speakers versus the rest. It's very hard to implement. I'm pessimistic that we can actually get away with it. But I have no brief for English, but I think it is very hard to do. It's the entire social setting is one where English is hierarchized in a way that I think is transparent to all of you. I'll come to the street smart, school smart, public life. No idea. I'm going to ask on the digital question. It's the jury is out on that. I think I have now seen enough evidence on it from all over the world, and the problem is schools do many things, and we forget that a lot of it is just teach children the discipline of sitting in one place and watching something, okay? Or the teacher usually doing something often boring, but still be willing to sit in one place and observe something really boring is a skill, and it needs to be inculcated in you. And I learned that very well in my school. It was. But so I don't think that it's a given that because there'll be an extremely. I totally believe that, in terms of pedagogical skills, there are actually very few people in the world who should be doing the teaching. Rukmini should be doing the teaching, and all of us should just be learning. That's the way the world should be. There's
no evidence on that. Huh?
Ideal world, there are only a few good teachers, and maybe if we all had the attention span that we need, we would be watching a video at home and we would learn more, because Rukmini is a spectacular teacher, and spectacular teachers are just a breed apart. So but I don't think that that's the only piece of. I think a lot of teaching is the social part of it, being in a group with other kids. It's the fact that we sit in one place and listen. It's the fact that we listen rather than get distracted. A lot of the problem with there are a bunch of these studies of, what happens if you give children a laptop? And the answer is they play games. Do they learn from the games? Maybe, mostly to how to play games. So I think it's inherently complicated, this fact that, schooling is a package of both the teacher and the entire process of sitting and listening. And until we solve the problem of sitting and listening, so in some sense, maybe there could be schools where you go and sit down and you see Rukmini on the screen, and maybe that will work. But it's two different problems that demand being solved when you say I'm going to use AI or digital media. Watching a phone on your own, that really takes a huge amount of attention span. You can see who were the kids who didn't fall back during Asar, when this is what most governments used in the world, is the kids from the privileged backgrounds whose parents could force them to sit and the children whose parents were busy or just didn't have the bandwidth to make them follow the videos didn't benefit. So I think there is a real schools have a real benefit, which is that they make you listen. Sometimes it's a pain in the butt, but nonetheless.
We'll take 3 more questions because I'm mindful of time. And those who have mics will now figure out who to give the mics to. Yeah, go ahead. Please keep your questions short so that we can get in more. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. My name is Prakhar. I'm a recent graduate from London School of Economics in International Social and Public Policy. So, sir, my question is, like you were mentioning about street smartness and school smartness and all these things. So, I have a larger question. So what is the larger, what I have understood is the larger purpose of education. Like, why do they need to study? It was again, I think what we have seen in the lately is the larger question is what is the purpose of their education? Why do they want to study? Because we have seen the enrollment ratio has been increased since the last few years, but the overall part regarding their purpose is missing. That is why students are getting enrolled in schools, in Anganwadis and all these places. But the larger question where the purpose and their intersectionality is missing. Like, why do they want to study? How do they want to study?
So the question is, why should we study?
Yeah.
Okay. Next, no, I think we keep it short. There are too many hands here.
Dr. Banerjee.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Sautrik. I'm a research consultant with a think tank. My question would be that when we are thinking from the mathematical perspective, like it's an algorithmic knowledge. But when we think about children learning or going to schools, there is a lot of social skills which we talk about, like the listening skill which you talked about, empathy being one of them. So from the context where you were saying that the teacher is pouring in rather than the questions are coming in, but when the education is not algorithmic, when it's more large context like empathy or social skill, what is the reflection on that? So,
okay. One question from the middle here. Yeah. Go ahead. You have the mic, so go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm Manoj. I work with Government of India. Sir, just a clarification or question. That in mathematics, sir, there are one kind of skills that is being tested is the problem formulation. And the second one is that once you have formulated the problem and you have to solve the equations. So in this study, when we measure the street children, the market skills, that may be slightly a different skill, though it is dealing with numbers, but the skills are little different. And that is more correlated to the problem formulation. And when we test the skills of school kids, where they are taught a particular algo, so that is a reflection of a second kind of mathematical skills where once you have the equation, how to solve that equation. So some clarification on that.
One last one back there, if you can. Yeah.
Thank you. I am Kashif from Jamia. So my question is, will I be wrong in saying that students who are doing well in market setting and abstract problem, because they have been experienced, they have been solving that problem. So because they are doing it, they are doing well because they have been spent time, so they have learned how to do in particular setting. The following to that is the second is that when you are saying market problem, you are included that sellers. So simulation also include. Why not buyers? When will children be performing differently? Our conclusion will hold if they are buyers.
Okay. I think in the front row.
Second row.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to conclude.
Too many great questions. I don't have. Let me say a few things. One is on the question of, I think on the larger profile education, we'll leave that to Rukmini. I don't know anything of such. And on the question of learning empathy, I think that in fact, the entire culture of top-down learning also undermines empathy. I think empathy is one where, you need to start by respecting people around you. And in the schools where there is a clear sense of, children are not, they are sort of directly inferior, and empathy is hard in that context. In the question of problem formulation, yeah, it is problem formulation, but in a sense the question is, why is it that the people who do well in assert tests don't eventually turn it into a way of framing it as a problem? I mean, that to me is it just suggests compartmentalization, that you somehow don't let your brain let the thought of, okay, I'm solving this problem, what could this possibly be useful for? You never ask those questions. And in a sense, what's striking about and I think that reflects something deep about the pedagogy that makes you so blind to the fact that these are the same thing. And the question of practice, yeah, sure, it's practice, but the fact is that the practice again doesn't. That's why I was insisting that it was practice, but it was practice that you could use for solving all the problems. All the problems are identical in a sense. You didn't use that practice because you switch on a different algorithm. You start writing on a piece of paper. That's what's striking about that fact. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
I know there are lots of questions in the room as well as we are getting questions on Zoom, but I'm also mindful of the time. We are well past the time that we had said. I think that just my own takeaway from the work that Abhijit has presented and a lot of work that is actually going on is a much more detailed research on what is in children's heads, what are they able to do, how are teachers thinking about math, what are they able to do in their classroom, and how much does the current curriculum actually constrain you from doing maybe many more things that are required. So I think this is, Abhijit, you've put out a call to action of doing more research on trying to really understand and correlate perhaps, the line that he had right in the beginning, that what do we learn from the failures and the successes that we have seen? And I think it calls for much more fine-grained research on, what's going on in children's minds and why is the switch not flipping when it needs to. From the Zoom questions, there are a lot of questions, but there's one question addressed to me, which I feel I must answer. The question is from Shailaja Chandra, if she's still listening. Would Rukmini agree to reframe the Asar questions given the findings? So I think my answer to that would be that Asar is just a tip of the iceberg, if you can say. It's just a taking of temperature. But I do think that both us, as well as I'm sure many other people, are going much deeper into trying to understand, just like Abhijit has done in this study. We've been working with Esther and her team on these, what is the before you get to school, what is the mathematical ability that you have and how can that be worked on? I think at every level, there is a lot more work to be done. And Mrs. Chandra, Asar is only one thing. We should think about what else can help us bring this sort of practice and theory, practice and observations into a place. I think the new education policy, especially for the early grades, provides a lot of opportunity for experimentation and for coming up with new things. The fact that today we have age 3 to age 8 as a continuum, and also if you look at the national curriculum framework for the early grades that's been released, it also allows for a breadth of skills. And I think that some of the things that we are saying is it is time to look at this whole way in which children approach mathematics, the way in which adults approach mathematics in a much broader way than what is there in our textbooks or the way we have learned. So I would like to hand over back to the IHD. And thank you again once for organizing this and for bringing Abhijit here to speak.
That's Professor Sharma sitting next to you and Professor Tanuka Endo. Yes, I would now request Professor Tanuka Endo, the coordinator of Center for Gender Studies at IHD, to please propose the vote of thanks.